Hello, my name is Scott Edward Anderson. I want to thank Sherry for the opportunity to participate in Solo Creators of the Berkshires. I'm a poet, essayist, and translator living in West Stockbridge. And 21 years ago, November 2002, I had a residency for a month at what was then known as the Malay Colony, now Malay Arts. And it's where I wrote this book, Dwelling, an Ecopoem. Driving north on US Route 22 back then, I had a panic attack, basically, driving up there en route to this month-long residency. Like the poet Edna St. Vincent Millay, whose candle burned at both ends, I set myself an ambitious task to write a book of poetry wrestling with the ideas of the philosopher Martin Heidegger in his essay, Building, Dwelling, Thinking. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. What was I thinking? And the reason I was doing that was because I was thinking about what it meant for our planet in what was then an emerging, not yet full-on climate crisis. I was on sabbatical from my job with the Nature Conservancy, and I had a month to do nothing but write, which I hadn't had for most of my life. Was I up to the task? That's what the panic attack was about. But also because I had sent a few poems to my friend and mentor, the poet Alison Hawthorne Deming, and she came back to me with her usual sort of challenge and encouragement. She said, "What you're writing is a phenomenology of how we live on the earth." So just imagine, that's what I'm driving up to do. And for mile after mile, I saw that phrase just running across the windshield, thinking, with these doubting voices echoing in the car. It was like I was the protagonist in a film noir, guilty, driving, guilty as charged. Who are you to think you can write something like this? Typical self-doubt of the writer. I pulled the car over, I got out, I paced around. My heart was racing, and finally I calmed down, and I drove the rest of the way to Austerlitz with a tight grip on the steering wheel, resolved but still petrified, which, as it turns out, is not a bad way to approach a writing project. It didn't help that I'd brought along Homer's Odyssey in the Robert Fagles translation for my downtime reading. Bringing Homer to a writing residency is a little like bringing a Bob Dylan songbook to a songwriting retreat. What was I thinking? But the concepts and some of the themes in the Odyssey were very similar to what I was wrestling with. The idea of home, how do we find it? How do we care for it? How do we get back to it? How do we live in the world and in a way that conjures stewardship? A year after the residency, one of the poems was selected by John Ashbery to be part of the work celebrating Malay's 30th anniversary. And there was my poem, Becoming, which emblazoned in red vinyl letters on the glass above the TSA security entrance at Albany International Airport. Then several of the poems started to appear in literary journals, including Terrain.org. And despite that early success, it took quite some time to publish this book, which I wrote in 2002. It wasn't published until 2018 by Shanti Arts Publications. The book won an Nautilus Award a year after it came out in 2019. And 2 years ago, the book was part of a syllabus in environmental philosophy at Providence College, where I got to be a guest lecturer for a week. And then last September, the book was published in Portugal in a translation by Margarita Valdegato as Habitar. An incredible journey, and it all started up there at Malay, up on the Taconic Ridge on the western edge of the Berkshires. My wife and I live on the other side of Harvey Mountain now, from Malay. And I feel like I've returned to the locus of creativity that started at Malay those 21 years ago. This year I joined the board of Malay just in time to celebrate its 50th anniversary. So in many ways, become full circle. I'm the author of 6 books, 4 books of poetry and 2 prose, which you can learn more about on my website, scottedwardanderson.com. And today my work is structured in a triangle with the 3 points, writing being at the top, translating from the Portuguese, and teaching. My translation work is connected to my rediscovery of my roots in the Portuguese archipelago known as the Azores. And I've concentrated most of my translation work on Azorean writers, from the 20th century poet and author Vitorino Nemesio to a contemporary novelist, Pedro Almeida Maya, whose work I'm translating now. My teaching has been a combination of private mentoring, guest lecturing, and workshops focused on what I'm calling deep attention, a practice in the art of profound concentration and how it can enhance the writing process. Last summer, I led a workshop with Ryan Shea at the Nature Institute in Ghent, New York, and this coming February, I will lead a workshop at Arrowhead, Herman Melville's home in Pittsfield. Thematically, my writing centers around nature and our human relationship to the natural world, the interconnected ideas of place and home, and my deepening connection with my ancestral islands, the Azores. I want to offer a sampling of my work, both in poetry and prose, and I'll start with a poem, Becoming, which was the one that was displayed at the Albany International Airport, which opens Dwelling, an eco-poem. Say that childhood memory has more relevance than yesterday. A moose calf curled up against the side of a house. Merely saying it may make it so. The way a sunflower towers over a child, each year growing shorter. A hermit crab crawling out of a coconut. Or no, the child growing taller. Naming the childhood memory bears witness to his knowing. A hawk swooping over a stubble field. Imagining the earth is all before me, blossoming as it stretches to the sun. A red eft held aloft in a small pink hand. Is home the mother's embrace? A cabbage butterfly flitting from flower tops. Do we carry home within? The child sees his world or hers, stroking the furry back of a bumblebee, head full of seed until it droops, spent, ready to sow the seeds of its own becoming. Say that our presence in the world, a millipede curling up at the slightest touch, is in making the book of our becoming. And this poem, also from Dwelling, called Shapeshifting, which has an epigraph from Homer's Odyssey. When young dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more. Give the night back to the night, the stars back to the sky. Give the earth spinning in space back to the earth. The stars look black tonight. Give the moon, no, keep the moon. It is the stars we want to give back. Give the soil back to the isopod, emerging to the surface. What is it looking for? Give the dawn back her rose-red fingers. She needs them more than the night. Give the blue jay back his morning, taken from him by the chickadee. Sounds are deeper in solitude. Give back to the sunshine what darkness is his. Give back to the night what light is hers. Stars, moon, clouds. Shape-shifting. Blue jay into chickadee, into blue jay. Night into day. Into what? Harassed unrest? Give back to the earth what is hers. She will forgive you for taking it, or she will turn into a wolf. Switching gears, I'd like to read a chapter from my book, Falling Up, which is this little one here, a memoir of second chances. It's titled The Gift of a Lifetime. On the day I turned 50 years old, in November 2013, I went hiking with my 3 kids in Philadelphia's Wissahickon Valley Park, a wooded 1,800-acre gorge with some 57 miles of trails. My oldest son, Jasper, then 17, had a spring in his step, enjoying the scenery, the fresh air, and being in the woods. It had been a while since we'd all been for a walk in the woods together. The twins, his younger siblings, were also getting excited in ways I hadn't seen before. Walker, my boy twin, stopped at the stump of a fallen tree cut to clear the trail. Counting the rings, he informed us the tree was likely 130 years old. His twin sister Elizabeth scrambled up the side of a craggy hill, proudly staking claim to part of it. A bald eagle flew over Wissahickon Creek. None of us said a word. Deep down, I realized there was nothing better than this moment. I was truly happy out in the woods with my kids for the first time in a long while, a couple of years since their mother and I broke up. The interval was a rough time, but we'd made it. Samantha and I got engaged in May of that year and were to be married the following spring. Her kids and mine had met over a camping trip the previous summer and had hit it off right away. Now I saw that many of my concerns about my kids were unfounded. They were better off with Papa, the real, authentic me, who was finally fully available to them. There in the woods, as I saw their senses being aroused, their awareness of the world coming alive, and their self-confidence building, I felt assured that our connection, our bond, would grow through experiences like this together. This was a legacy of connectedness to nature that I had forged in my own childhood through my own experiences in the natural world. I often wandered alone in the woods at the ages of 9 and 10 years old. We lived in Plainville, Massachusetts, a typical small sub-rural town between Providence and Boston, with a classic main street running through it, surrounded by woods, wetlands, and pastures. One day, walking back from a friend's house, I took a detour through the woods, where I stumbled into a boggy wetland, probably around Fuller Pond as I map it now. As soon as I stepped in, I realized my mistake. The mud grabbed my foot and held it tight. Somehow I knew not to panic. When I put my other foot on solid ground and started to pull out my stuck foot, I felt my sneaker getting pulled off by the mud and pushed down slightly until my foot slipped back into the sneaker, then tried again with the same result. Finally, on my third try, out came my foot and sneaker intact. 20 years later, while working for the Nature Conservancy in New York's Hudson Valley, I found myself in that same kind of wetland habitat. Even if I didn't know the names, I recognized some of the plants and conditions from back in Plainville. I built upon my childhood experience, and this time, as an adult, I knew where not to step, unless wearing mud boots. The fact is, my son Jasper had long been developing his own connectedness to nature, simply by growing up in proximity to the natural world, and he seemed to be enthusiastic about learning from his surroundings. Like most toddlers, Jasper first experienced the world by jumping, running, rushing, and flinging himself into it. He was born in Anchorage, Alaska, so his first playground, our backyard, was the Chugach Mountains that surround the city. He enjoyed the view from the backpack child carrier for a while, but as soon as he could walk, he wanted to get out and move. I'd set him down and the tiny engines in his kid-sized lightweight hiking boots got moving, fast. He clambered into the blueberry bushes on the hillside. He giggled, looking up at me, wanting me to react. Falling butt first into the berries, he laughed like a berry-mad bear, reminding me of the playful black bear cub we saw a few weeks before at the Alaska Zoo, pacing back and forth, climbing and tumbling over logs and berry bushes in the habitat created for it by the zoo staff. From then on, Jasper's nickname was Little Bear, to my Papa Bear. When Jasper pitched forward out of the blueberries and down onto the gravel and dirt path, I resisted the urge to rescue him. At the precise moment before impact, He tucked under and rolled off the trail and onto soft tundra. How did he know how to do this? His rolling left him berry-stained, a little dusty, and very pleased with himself. Back in the pack, Jasper rode up to the first of two low summits. Suddenly, from below, we heard the others in our party. They'd spotted a porcupine lumbering up a narrow, shallow ravine. Jasper couldn't see it from that distance, but neither was he concerned. He got bored standing in one spot, kicked at my back, and shouted, "Go, go!" We headed for the top of the second summit, Jasper humming happily in my ear. I fed him blueberries over my shoulder. Not enough of the berries were as ripe as we'd want if we were collecting bushels, but some were sweet enough to please this toddler and his papa. Slapping me with joy, he smeared berry juice in my hair and all over my neck. I couldn't see his face, but I knew there was a big purple smile behind me. If moments like this have any lasting effect, I suspect they engender a connectedness to the land through memory, which creates a sense of place. Someday, Jasper may feel an inexplicable pull to seek out experience such as this on his own, or with his own children, who will teach him to see nature with fresh eyes, as Jasper showed me. A child gives a parent the gift of slowing down and seeing the world anew. My son slowed me down on the trails and in the backyard, where he had his favorite birch tree, among the flowers, moss, and mushrooms. Slowing down, I looked more closely at the little things around us. He picked up a leaf, showed it to me. "Leaf," I said. He tried to mimic me, but there were too many F's in his version of the word. Still, I responded, "Yes, that's it. Leaf." I learned more about the natural world by observing what he observed, lingering over the objects he lingered over. I paid close attention for another reason. I wanted him to know what these things are one day, when naming things became important to him. I loved discovering with him, but I also wanted to have the answers to his questions when they came down the trail. And now, back to poetry. I want to read the opening section of my bilingual book-length poem, Azorian Suite. I mentioned that I've been translating from Azorian poets and writers, and my connection to the Azores has been deepening for the past 5 years. The sea surrounds, is ever present, endless. The sea surrounds, and sea sounds swirl and sway. Humid torpor of temperament. Fog and shrouds, clouds caught on peaks, wrapping the mountain. A helmet of white, gray, ash, the ever-present volcanoes, threat of fire and destruction, threat of sea wind and wave, thread of saudade woven into the fabric of all life on the islands. Saudades for the land, enshrouds the land, enshrouds the islanders surrounded by sea. São Miguel, island of my ancestors, who settled here in the original waves, 1450s or earlier, as far as I can tell. From the Alentejo they came, encouraged or escaping, I know not. São Miguel, the green island, jewel in the bracelet of the archipelago, formed by two volcanoes reaching for each other, a chain of eruptions enclosing the space between them. Populated like that chain, scattered by wind and sea, until 1906, when my great-grandparents left for America, scattered across the sea. My return over a century later fills me with mixed emotions. Have I come home or simply returned to reclaim a lost heritage, something denied me by my grandfather's willingness to forget the past, to relinquish the saudades da terra, so much a part of the Azorian character? The phrase can mean longing for the land, or I miss the earth, which seems so necessary now with the threat of climate change added to the island condition. Sea surge from Hurricane Lorenzo overflowing onto the low-lying streets at sea's edge. salt water burning the wine grapes, flooding the edge of the villages. How high will the sea rise in the next century? How will the islanders survive? What becomes of Saudades de Terra when the land is swallowed by sea? Is the island a cloud, or is the cloud an island? Horizon of salt, rim of insular identity. Eternal horizon, damp, steady monotony of sea. Mist entering bones, the Azorian torpor. The sea makes dreamers of men, saddening and depressing them with its monotony. Green land, gray blue sky, muted and humid. Our roots are within these mountains of lava, raging winds, reckless rains, voracious sea. That renders an island an island. Sea that is not wine dark, more like wet slate or the undulating back of a crocodile's scales, moving slowly yet deliberately towards its prey, sea monster of melancholy. And I'll close with two poems from my latest book, Wine Dark Sea, New and Selected Poems and Translations. This is one called Owl in the Gloaming. Although real birders frown on it, I play back songs of birds, trying to lure them out of the wood. Scree-chee-chee of song sparrow, mashing notes of catbird. What cheer, what cheer, what cheer of cardinal. This irritates the birds. They fly reconnaissance over my head. Catbird looping furtive patterns above me, crossing the path from tree to tree. Sparrow chasing catbird, thinking he's got too close, although the interloper was me. In the unquiet afternoon, sloughing into evening. Now a monotonous trill, tremulous horse whinny of the screech owl, unmistakable hideous laughter. Then overhead, something large, gray, all wing beat and bodily hum. All other birds go silent in the owl's shadow. Hidden in the trees, his scaly bark-like feathers can't be made out in the gloaming. Now there's a distant thrumming, not from the bird app on my phone, rather from within my chest, vibrating on this turning earth under an owl's wing. And finally, another bird poem. This is called Doubting Finches. The house finch nest in my porch light has a curious architecture, made entirely of found things. Dried seed heads from last year's columbine, dusky strands of my daughter's hair, small sticks, rose thorns, bits of string, a gold thread from a cigarette pack wrapper. Inside, wool-lined, cotton and fleece, it holds 3 eggs, blue with tawny flecks. The female finch sits on the nest for an unusually long time. So long, I fear she is mistaken, or my messing with the nest has disrupted gestation. She picked her mate for the redness of his head and chest, proxy for feeding prowess, I guess. In a few weeks, all will be gone. Cherry blossoms drifting on air, dogwoods blooming, oaks leafing out, and the female finch finding another mate to start a second family this season. Who was it that said doubt is a privilege of the faithful? At least I think someone said it, or should have. Then it was me finding another mate, another home, another reason. And I saw they swept out the finch nest from that old porch light as soon as I was gone. Thank you again to Sherry. And for those of you interested in learning more about me and my work, my website again is scottedwardanderson.com. Thank you.